Welcome to Jared Scott Outdoors, your source in the field for local outdoor news. This week on Jared Scott Outdoors, we're going out after antelope. Whenever we've got a tag in the family, I really enjoy this hunt as it's a nice break from the hard elk hunting we've been doing earlier. And this year we were fortunate to have my wife draw a tag. She doesn't get to go out hunting very often, but pronghorn is the perfect opportunity to take her out. It's not too hard, you can do half days, and in the end have a lot of fun. Needless to say, I was pretty happy when she drew the tag. So let's get hunting. So Candice and I weren't able to go out during the first few weeks of the pronghorn hunt, but figured that was for the best as we could let the animals calm down after getting chased around so much during the opening week. We headed out to my go-to spot where Cade shot that giant buck last year. It requires hiking up to the top of a knob that hides a little draw that often holds a herd of antelope. Getting to the top, we peeked over and didn't see a thing. We kept hiking around to get a good angle on all the spots and still in the end didn't see a single goat. That was a bust and honestly a surprise, but that's how it goes. So we headed back to the truck to go look elsewhere. So that was a bust. We went up into a spot that typically has a handful of antelope that are kind of holed up in a little spot that's not so visible from all the side roads. There was not an antelope there. So we'll just keep trying, keep driving around and see what we can find. We'll pick some up. Just got to put some time in. All right, so now we're doing the driving around, trying to find other antelope, and I spotted some that had a bedded up buck. I couldn't quite tell how good it was. Rather than spook them by stopping right then, we drove out of sight and then hiked back to a point we could peek over and check them out. There were only a few does and one bedded up buck. The buck looked like it could be a possible shooter at first glance because of its height, but even though it was a ways off and the wind was shaking my spotting scope pretty good, I could tell that while it was fairly tall, there was no mass on it and the prongs seemed almost non-existent. With that in mind, this was not a shooter buck, so we headed back to the truck and kept looking. Getting to another spot where there's a big drainage that can't be seen by the main roads, Candice and I hiked out to a vantage point to see what was there. This time, we did see lots of pronghorns. There were two fairly large groups of goats, each with a few bucks. The closest group is the one I focused on, as they seem to have a couple potential shooter bucks and were in a spot we might be able to get in on them. There were two notable bucks. The one on the right has really nice prongs, but they seem to be really low. Kind of odd, quite honestly. Which means the overall height of these horns might not be that impressive. The other buck seems to have good length, but smaller prongs. We were far enough away though that I really wanted to get a better look at them because maybe they were better than I was thinking. Meanwhile, further away was that other group with lots of goats. I had to laugh at the fact that they were obviously wanting to cross this fence, but were having a hard time figuring out where to do it. The reason I chuckle at this is because here we have what's probably the fastest animal on our continent, and they won't just jump over a fence. They crawl under fences, so they have to find a good spot to slide under and then they'll cross. This is just one of those things that doesn't make much sense to me. You'd think with their speed they could just hop on over it. Back to the first group. They were on the move, which meant we had to make our move. Alright, so we're down to our last bit of daylight, but we found some that are potential. We just can't quite tell from this distance. So we're gonna go ahead and move in closer and gamble that there might be a shooter there and have just enough daylight to make it happen. So we'll see. Well, we cut the distance in half and found another good rocky point to hide in while we got a better look at these bucks. I was hoping that maybe this would be close enough to shoot from, but it wasn't. Like many cases, when you're far off, it looked a lot closer than it really was. We still weren't 100% sure on these bucks, and with shooting light ending in about 20 minutes, we decided we had to push in close and see what happened. Unfortunately, there were too many other pronghorn that had separated themselves from the group we were trying to sneak in on, and they caught us, and spooked right through the others, taking them all with them. So with that, our hunt ended for the day. we tried to push in on that one just to get a better look. It was a tempting buck, but we were only down to a few minutes of light, so we pushed it into a spot that one of the other groups of antelopes that were a couple hundred yards away from them caught us. It was a gamble, but it was our only choice. So they caught us and they ran through everything. That made the decision that it was not a shooter. So we'll be back another day. So we came out last week and we did find some antelope. However, in this one particular area, a lot of square miles, most of the antelope had actually moved in on private land. And so that's kind of a little bit frustrating. It's almost the end of the hunt. It ends this week. We did go down and find some other stuff that had some decent goats, but we ran out of daylight. Anyhow, we've come back up. We checked this area again that was pretty sparse, and we just found a few, but we checked that private land, and sure enough, there's a pretty nice buck in there. And I had contacted the landowner. Just something anybody can do. If you got private land, just be considerate and go contact, and you never know, they might let you. And sure enough, this guy's going to let us go on and see if we can hunt. So we're going to go ahead and sneak on in there. We've got a half mile to cover. Maybe we had to skirt around, and it's just flat sagebrush, if you can see behind us here. And so we're using a little ravine, a dry wash that we're hoping will get us closer. There's a lot of eyeballs. There's probably 100 antelope total on all this land, but in that area there's 40 or 50. So we're going to see if we can sneak in and get a better look. It looked like a pretty nice antelope, looked like a shooter. So what do you think?
We'll see how this works.
So who knows, it might be hike out and bust them before we ever get a shot, but we got to try. This is the buck we spotted from that other angle earlier. From this angle you can see that the top of the buck's horns curl way back. Its prongs seem pretty solid as well. Like other times though, this was from a long ways off, so it would take a closer look to be sure, but from this angle it sure seemed like a shooter buck. As you can see, this dry wash was perfect to close in on these animals without being seen. If this resulted in a filled tag, it would be great and the hike well worth it. However, this was also going to take a lot of time, and so if it didn't work out, we'd lose a lot of daylight on this stalk. See him yet. After covering the windy half mile to get closer, we peeked over a few times until we were close enough to start seeing the antelope. I can see a handful of them in one buck. He might be him. I don't know for sure. It's a hard spot to get in on so many animals. Going further along the wash, we tried another angle. I guess he's about 250, 300 yards off. So in range, but we're looking over sagebrush, so somehow we got to get in a place that we can actually set up and shoot. And again, there's 40 other antelope. So we have a lot of work to do just to get a shot still. From here, I could see lots of the goats. And as you can see, there were plenty of them. On the far left, I finally spotted the one we were looking for. So here's the buck. We could see him pretty good over the tops of the sagebrush, but that didn't necessarily translate into a good shot. I wanted Candice to have a solid rest, and so far we didn't have one from this point. However, as we kept watching him trying to make a game plan, the buck just didn't seem to be as solid as it did earlier in the day from that other angle. Pronghorn bucks are hard to judge. One way to at least get a feel for their size is to compare the horn length to their ears. As I looked at the top of the ears and compared it to the buck's prongs and such, it just seemed like it wasn't quite what I thought it was earlier. We watched and waited, still looking for an opening, and then finally made the hard decision. Alright, so after giving this a couple hours and sneaking in, we're in range. We've just decided it's not quite the wow factor buck. It's a good buck, but we might regret this, but we're gonna keep looking at it.
can't tell if she wants to just shoot this and get the heck out of here or not.
I don't want to crawl. He says we might have to crawl. I don't want to crawl. If it comes down to crawling, we're done.
Anyhow, so I think we're going to just stand up and walk out. So hopefully we won't regret this.
Heading out for one more try, we went first to that private property to see if anything new had moved in. There wasn't, so we headed off up into the foothills to see what was going on up there.
Possibly our last hurrah here. We spotted a bunch of antelope up on top of a hill quite a ways off, but one of them looks like potentially is a pretty big buck, so we have just enough time to get up there and try to get a shot before we gotta call it. So see what happens.
We had a good mile or so to hike before we'd finally make it close to the area we hoped to get in on these antelope.
How excited are you?
This is the last hike.
So you're excited?
I told Jared he has to remember it's me, his wife, behind him hiking. Because if you've been with Jared, he sometimes forgets that we're all not like him.
So she's not excited for the potential to get a big buck. She's excited this is the last hike.
The group of pronghorn were on the top of the ridge, and so we had planned on popping up on the next ridge over. Hopefully that would put them in range and allow us to set up on them for a good shot. This was the view from where we'd spotted them, obviously a long ways off. Between the distance and the breeze, it was hard to see the buck details on camera, but I could tell it was a solid buck. Getting to the area we thought might be close, I peeked over the ridge, and sure enough, there they were. Not wanting to get caught, I only saw a few of them before I ducked out of sight. I had seen a few does, but the buck wasn't visible yet. The good thing was, they were in range at just over 200 yards.
Alright, so I found at least a couple of them. They're right there, so we came up the right draw. I was a little nervous about that, but now we gotta see if we can sneak in with absolutely no cover and get a shot. We just gotta get to where we can see them.
Knowing right where they were now, we swung around a bit further to have a better angle. We were able to get to a good spot that would allow a shot if the buck showed up, but for now, all we could see were 4 does. Apparently the buck was bedded up just over the round of the hill. We waited for about 45 minutes as the does got up and fed around. Eventually they would feed over the edge, and then we'd be able to move over to find that buck. Or if we were lucky, the buck would feed our way. Well, eventually the does did feed on over and out of sight. We were running out of time, and so we had to hurry over to make something happen.
Yeah, there are 2 walking right side by side. Aim at the...
Getting to where we last saw those does, we found the buck and the rest of the herd. I think they'd gotten wind of us and were a little spooked, and were now at 400 yards. I was trying to get Candice on the buck instead of filming the animals, and so you can't see them way down below. But needless to say, with all the does around the buck, she wasn't able to get a shot. You saw I was a little frantic with the camera there. Just, I think they winded us at first and kind of got them moving a little bit. We came over. There they were, but they were already on edge, and they kind of started going. We tried to get her on a tough shot. You know, they were moving, they're heading down. I was just waiting for them to stop. They finally stopped, maybe about 400 yards, and then it was just walking between the does and just didn't ever give a clear shot, and then they were off again. So that was the best we could do today. This might be our last trip out, so we might have just eaten an antelope tag, which is tough because it's it takes on average 20 years to draw this tag. So, what do you think, Candice?
I think I'm good at eating tags.
She's eaten a couple other tags. So, yeah. And really my point of bringing this up is it's okay to eat a tag. You saw we had some shots at some smaller bucks that just didn't give us that, oh wow, that's an awesome buck, let's hurry and take that one, kind of thing. And we've got an elk already in the freezer. We're probably going to get another one. We've got some muzzleloader tags. We're gonna have meat in the freezer, so it's not necessary that we fill this tag just on a buck because we got the tag, in my opinion. Even though it might take a long time, We were saying, God, if it takes 20 more years, how old does that put us? Well, we're not going to talk about that.
We won't be hunting.
So anyways, tag soup, and it's okay. It's all right to do it. We had some fun, and we got to get some adrenaline, at least I did. Hopefully Candice did too there at the end. So a good way to kind of finish it up. And, you know, I hiked her tail end off. We had some fun. We laughed a lot about all the hiking and different things. It wasn't as easy as I said, all that kind of stuff. So we made memories, good, bad, whatever they are, we made memories. Tune in next week at the same time for another episode of Jared Scott Outdoors.